the right to open and manage a bank account money. It has always been more than just currency. It is a language of possibility, a tool for turning dreams into reality. It's freedom, the freedom to choose your own path, to provide for your loved ones, to feel secure in an uncertain world. It's the power to decide, to act, to build. But for generations of Filipino women, this power was kept just out of reach. For centuries, Filipino women have been the economic backbone of their families and communities. They worked tirelessly, managing households, supporting families, and running small businesses with remarkable ingenuity. Yet despite being the engines of local commerce, they had little to no legal control over the very finances they generated. The legal framework, inherited from the Spanish Civil Code of 1889, was the invisible barrier. During the early decades of the 1900s, and even up to the mid-20th century, married women were legally considered dependents, their identities subsumed under their husband's authority. This meant they could not open bank accounts, sign contracts, take out loans, or even manage their own savings without their husband's explicit written consent. Every peso earned, every financial decision was subject to his approval. It's hard to imagine today, but back then, even a woman earning her own income could not freely decide what to do with it. Her salary, her inheritance, the profits from her market stall, legally, they were not hers to command. The law did not see her as a full financial individual. It saw her as an extension of her husband, a capable but ultimately dependent partner. This began to change with the landmark passage of the new Civil Code of 1950. It was a pivotal moment, a crack in the patriarchal foundation of the law. For the first time in Philippine history, women were granted legal capacity. This wasn't just jargon, it was a key. It unlocked the right to manage their own property, open bank accounts, and sign contracts independently, without needing a man's permission. This was not just a legal reform, it was a cultural awakening. It was the state finally acknowledging what Filipino families had known for generations, that the woman is a pillar of the household, not just its ward. Women could now save money for their children's education, invest in their own small businesses, and build futures on their own terms. The impact was immediate and deeply personal. Imagine a young teacher in a rural barrio. For the first time, she could open her own savings account, putting aside a portion of her modest salary each month, dreaming of one day buying a small piece of land. Or a widow who, instead of being forced to rely on male relatives, could now legally manage the land and income her late husband left behind, securing her own future without supervision. And a working mother in the city could finally make independent decisions for her family's financial security, opening a separate account for emergencies, a safety net woven with her own hands. The momentum continued. By the 1970s, a new wave of reforms further strengthened women's economic independence, building upon the foundation laid in 1950. The Family Code of the Philippines and progressive labor laws explicitly recognized women as full economic citizens, equal in financial rights and responsibilities. These laws dismantled the last vestiges of the husband's legal dominance over conjugal property and affirmed a woman's right to pursue a profession without marital consent. With these legal shields in place, Filipino women entered the worlds of banking, finance, and business, not just as clients, but as professionals, managers, and visionary leaders. From small rural credit cooperatives empowering farmers to the highest floors of national banks in Makati, their presence reshaped the country's economic landscape. They championed microfinance, bringing capital to the grassroots and proving that investing in women yields the highest returns. Money was no longer a man's language. It became a shared voice, one that Filipino women spoke with confidence, intelligence, and purpose. This financial literacy evolved with the times, from passbooks and ledgers to the digital wallets and mobile banking apps of today, putting financial power directly into the palm of her hand. The right to manage money was a gateway right. It opened new doors to political influence, to business leadership, and to a profound sense of empowerment at home and in the world. It was a quiet revolution, fought not in the streets with placards, but in bank queues, in business plans, and in the simple, powerful act of a signature. It was a revolution declared in the sound of coins that now, finally, truly belonged to her. The right to vote. If education gave women knowledge, and property gave them stability, the right to vote gave them power. It was the ultimate tool for self-determination, the power to not just participate in society, but to actively shape the laws, policies, and destiny of their nation. This wasn't merely about casting a ballot, it was about claiming a seat at the table where the future was being decided, ensuring that the concerns of half the population were no longer footnotes, but headlines. For decades, that table was exclusively male. Before 1937, Filipino women were systematically excluded from the political sphere, barred from both voting and holding public office. Politics was considered a man's arena, a rugged domain for leaders, soldiers, and landowners. The prevailing arguments, echoing colonial-era patriarchal norms, claimed that politics would tarnish women's domestic grace, that their duties were to the home and family, not the state. It was a world built by and for men, with no room for the voices of mothers, teachers, or nurses. But Filipino women, increasingly educated and economically active, refused to remain silent spectators in their own country. In the early 20th century, a powerful movement began to coalesce, led by a vanguard of brilliant and tireless activists. Figures like Pura Villanueva Calao, a writer and intellectual, Concepcion Felix de Calderon, a pioneering feminist, and Josefa Llanes Escoda, a renowned social worker, became the architects of the suffrage campaign. They formed organizations like the Asociación Feminista Filipina, using every tool at their disposal, petitions, public speeches, and relentless lobbying to demand their fundamental right to vote. Their journey was fraught with resistance. For decades, their impassioned pleas were dismissed by an all-male legislature. Opponents argued that suffrage was a foreign concept, ill-suited to Filipino culture. But they persisted, their resolve hardening with every setback. The turning point came with the 1935 Constitution, which included a crucial, if challenging, provision. Women could gain suffrage if at least 300,000 of them voted in favor in a special national plebiscite. The challenge was immense. Suffragists had just over a year to mobilize hundreds of thousands of women across the archipelago, many in remote rural areas with limited access to information. They launched an extraordinary grassroots campaign, traveling from town to town, speaking in plazas, and going door to door to explain what was at stake. Finally, on April 30th, 1937, the nation held its breath as women went to the polls for the first time in a vote to decide their own political fate. The result was a landslide. Far exceeding the 300,000 vote threshold, over 447,000 women voted yes, a staggering 90% of those who participated. This overwhelming victory was undeniable. It silenced the opposition and officially granted Filipino women the right to vote and to run for public office. This historic moment placed the Philippines at the forefront of progress, making it one of the very first countries in Asia to recognize women's full political rights, years ahead of nations like Japan, China, and India. It was a beacon of democracy in the region, and almost immediately, women began shaping the nation's democratic future. They didn't just vote, they ran for office and won. In 1938, just a year after the plebiscite, Carmen Planas was elected as the first female city councilor of Manila. Soon, women were serving as mayors and governors, bringing new perspectives to local governance. They joined civic organizations, and eventually, the halls of Congress. One of the most prominent trailblazers was Geronima Pecson. A former teacher and social worker, she was elected in 1947 as the first female senator of the Philippines. In the Senate, she championed legislation for education, social welfare, and women's rights, carrying forward the legacy of the suffragists who had fought for her right to be there. The right to vote was not just a victory for women, it was a profound victory for democracy itself. It affirmed the principle that a government's legitimacy rests on the consent of all its people. Because when women vote, societies listen. When women lead, nations heal and progress. Today, the legacy of the suffrage movement is alive and well. Filipino women consistently register and vote at higher rates than men, demonstrating a powerful commitment to civic duty. From the silent ballots of 1937 to the powerful female leaders of today, senators, mayors, cabinet secretaries, and even presidents, the seed planted by the suffragists continues to grow, branching into every level of Philippine society. The fight for the ballot proved that the voices of Filipino women were not just necessary for a functioning democracy, they were, and remain, an unstoppable force for change. The right to work professionally. Education had opened minds, the vote had opened doors, but the final, most challenging frontier was the workplace, a public arena where the promise of equality would be tested not just in theory, but every single day. It was here, in the offices, factories, and fields, that women would have to prove their worth not just as citizens, but as professionals, transforming the very economic and social fabric of the nation. During the American period, and into the early years of independence, more women began working outside the home, marking a quiet but profound revolution. The first wave entered professions often seen as extensions of their traditional roles. They became teachers, shaping young minds, and nurses, caring for the sick. These roles were crucial, but they were also considered appropriate for women. Simultaneously, the expanding civil service created new opportunities. Women filled positions as clerks and public servants, becoming the reliable backbone of a growing bureaucracy. The American influence brought a new, powerful idea: the modern Filipino woman. This was a figure promoted in schools and media, educated, skilled, and an active participant in the economy. She was no longer confined to the domestic sphere. She was a partner in nation building. This ideal inspired a generation to pursue careers and see their professional ambitions as a valid and valuable part of their identity. By the 1950s and 60s, women's participation in professional work grew steadily. Beyond offices, they entered factories and service industries, becoming an indispensable part of the post-war economic boom. Yet, progress was uneven. They were still often paid less than men for the same work, a glaring inequity that persisted for decades. Many high-paying professions and leadership roles remained male-dominated fortresses, but the tide was undeniably turning. The 1970s ushered in a new era of legal reform. The 1974 Labor Code was a landmark, explicitly recognizing women's right to equal pay for equal work and providing protections against discrimination. Crucially, it also institutionalized maternity leave benefits, acknowledging the dual roles many women played as both professionals and mothers. Discrimination based on gender was now challenged not just socially, but with the full force of the law. These policies were not just ink on paper. They were tools that empowered women to demand fairness. Armed with legal backing and growing social acceptance, women began to break barriers in fields once thought impossible. They became judges, interpreting the law from the bench. They donned hard hats as engineers, building the nation's infrastructure. They became scientists, pushing the boundaries of knowledge, and executives, steering corporations. They led classrooms, hospitals, and government agencies, proving their capabilities in every sector. And as they worked, they proved a fundamental truth, again and again. Competence has no gender. Success is a product of skill, dedication, and vision, qualities that are not defined by one sex. Today, Filipino women are among the most empowered in Asia, a testament to this long struggle. They lead companies, command military units, and have twice served as head of state. The Philippines consistently ranks among the top countries for gender equality in the world, particularly in economic and political participation. This achievement is not an accident. It is the direct result of generations of women who fought for their place at the table, in the boardroom, and on the world stage. Yet, the journey is not over. The workplace continues to evolve, presenting new challenges. The gender pay gap, though narrowed, still persists. The double burden of career and domestic responsibilities remains a significant hurdle for many. And so, the pursuit of true balance, genuine inclusion, and unwavering respect must continue. The goal is not just for women to have a place at work, but for the workplace to be a place that works for women. Behind every professional success is a history of women who refused to stay within prescribed boundaries. They defied expectations and dismantled barriers one by one. They carried books to gain knowledge, ballots to claim their voice, and briefcases to enter the economy. And through these simple acts, they carried the immense weight and brilliant hopes of generations to come. From classrooms to corporations, from the first vote to the highest office, the Filipino woman's story is one of triumph against limits. 1863, the right to education. 1937, the right to vote. 1950, full legal and financial equality. 1970s, equal work opportunities. And today, a nation where women stand side by side with men in shaping the future. But history is not just about what has been achieved, it's about what must still be protected. Rights, once earned, must always be defended. Empowerment must always be nurtured. To every Filipina listening, the teacher, the student, the mother, the dreamer, the leader, your story continues this legacy. Your voice is the echo of centuries of courage. The evolution of Filipino women's rights is not just a tale of the past. It's a living testament that equality, once imagined, can be made real, and that the power of a woman's will can transform a nation. This has been the evolution of the rights of Filipino women. Thank you for listening, and may we never stop moving forward. Settings: use appropriate media. Make the background music inspirational. Use a female voice for the narrator.